Hello beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bettina and I'm the makeup enthusiast. In today's video, you may be able to guess what we are doing by the empty spaces behind me here. Today's video, I am finally bringing you my eyeshadow palette collection video. This is my up-to-date video. The last time I did one of these videos, I think it was maybe 2019 or something like that. I can't quite remember, but there has been quite a considerable addition to my collection since the last video. So we're gonna go through all the palettes I have in my collection. And yeah, if you have any of these palettes or if you want to see some looks or anything done with any of these palettes, let me know down in the comments. Before we get into the collection video, if you do enjoy watching beauty content, enjoy watching project panning videos and any other beauty related content, I hope you consider subscribing down below. And without further ado, let's jump on into the giant collection videos. My table in front of me here is jam-packed full of all of my eyeshadow palettes. I'm not entirely sure exactly how many eyeshadow palettes that I own, if I'm honest. I do have a spreadsheet set up, but that spreadsheet includes my eyeshadow palettes that have singles in it and also like my single compact eyeshadows. So I'm not entirely sure how many eyeshadow palettes that I own, but just while we're on that point, if you do want to see a follow-up video of my single eyeshadow collection, let me know down in the comments and I can definitely look at doing that one. That one will be a shit ton easier than this one. So I will, I guess, try and go like brand by brand as much as I possibly can. I guess we'll start with the giant pile in front of me. So there's like 60 million piles in front of me, but we'll start with the one right in front of me here. And right on top is my glorious Tarte Beauty textured neutrals. This is the volume 1. I will say I am so sad that Tarte decided to close Tarte Beauty. I think it was, you know, whole drama with the whole thing that's going on with the suits and all of that. But I really enjoy this palette. I think it's a great palette. I love how it's laid out. The only thing that I don't love in this palette is the pressed glitters, but that's just me because I personally don't enjoy pressed glitters. But I think all of the other eyeshadows in this palette are gorgeous and I think they blend really nicely. I think it's a great little color story. I like how it's laid out and I'm really glad now that I know that Tarte Beauty is closed. I am really glad that I have this in my collection and it has a massive mirror on it and the mirror is like really good quality. Let's go with Viseart next. I have, I believe, only 3 Viseart palettes. So the first ones are the Grande Pro Volume 1 and 2. If I'm honest, I do kind of regret these. I think one was a gift and I purchased one. I do kind of regret getting these or wanting to get these because I don't get nearly as much use out of these as I thought I would. And I am not a great lover of like the color story, especially on volume 1. I have had this sitting in my makeup kit and even then I don't really use it all that much. I do feel like I wasted my money a little bit on that one. Even the leather is like, or the packaging is starting to go funny on this one as well. And then volume 2 is the shimmer palette. This one I do like more than the volume 1. But again, I have a lot better shimmers in my collection, especially my singles collection. Even some of the eyeshadow palettes in front of me here, I feel are a lot better quality than these ones. So that's the 2 Grande Pros that I have. I do know that there is a Grande Pro 3. I decided I didn't need that one. And there is also a new like up-to-date version of the Grande Pro 1, which I think has like an extra row or 2 of shadows in it. My other Viseart palette is the Viseart Triced palette. I received this one in one of my lucky bags. And I think I have done a video on this one. I think I used it for a week or something. I mean, it's a nice little palette, but again, it's not one that I really prefer to grab for, and it's not one that I find myself gravitating towards a lot. Next, we might move on to some palettes that I only have like one from that brand. These 2 here. So the first one is the Nomad Cosmetics the Nomad Iceland palette, the Fire and Ice palette. And I have used this one a little bit, not really all that much. I've had it for like a year now and I probably have some shadows in there that I haven't used yet. But when I have used this one, I have really enjoyed this palette and the formula, and I do really like the imprints in the palettes or in the pans. I think the imprints are really cool. Then we have my Enchanted Luster Luxury Chrome Bow palette. This is an Australian brand based down in Melbourne. This was, I think, their first like big large eyeshadow palette, and yeah, I don't know, it's a full on like shimmer palette. Now that I guess that I am finding that I am happy to use palettes that are completely shimmer and just like pick another palette out to accompany it with, I might actually find myself gravitating back towards this one more often. But there are some shades in this palette that I just really couldn't vibe with and I didn't enjoy, but there were also some other shadows in this palette that I really enjoyed. It is like a hot mess. I don't know whether you can see how messy it's gotten, and there's kind of like the oils are starting to seep out of the palette, and the cover, the vellum cover, is like fully crinkled from the moisture. More palettes that I only have one from the brand. We have the, this was an absolute fucking mess, this palette. This is the Amy Loves Beauty and Amy Loves Beauty and Amy Hearts Beauty and Amy Loves Makeup collaboration. This was the Alma palette. This turned out to be an absolute fail of a palette. I do still have it because it cost me a lot of money to get this palette, to buy it and get it shipped and conversion. And then there was also a mix up with some of the other stuff that I ordered in my order. And I had to fight for like a refund, and I never ended up getting a refund for the particular item, and it was not a pleasant experience. So more brands that I only have one palette from them. Next up we have the Makeup Geek Vegas Lights palette, and this is what it looks like. This is like the only, I have a lot of singles from Makeup Geek, but this is the only eyeshadow palette that I have from them. I think this is one of the first, I think, eyeshadow palettes that they came out with. It's a great little palette. I do have pan in one of the shades. This is the Menagerie Cosmetics Feral eyeshadow palette. I really enjoy this eyeshadow palette. I think the quality and the formula is really great on this palette. I love the color story, and the packaging is next freaking level. Love the packaging. Sugar Pill Mini Fun Size or Mini Color Palette, the Fun Size palette. This was the first one they came out with in this like 9-pan format. I didn't totally love the colors. I didn't totally love the formula on this palette, and I did find that there are a few pans in this palette for me that got hard pan. I found it a little bit tricky to work with, and I just didn't love it. I like the color story, but the formula really falls down for me. Nabla Cutie palette, love this palette. This is like me and a color story. I love working with these like pinks and purples, like magenta colors. Then we have a little palette that I purchased from Jill Stewart. This is a little, how do I even open this again? This is a little quint, and I did pick this one up when I was in Japan. If I'm honest, I don't even know whether I've used this, but it is really like nostalgic for me because I did pick it up when I was traveling in Japan and I had a fantastic time. So every time I look at my like little Jill Stewart stuff, it gives me like a little smile. Bobbi Brown, this is the City Twilight palette. Now this is actually kind of like a little bit of an all-in-one palette. It does have 4 shadows up the top here, and then down in the bottom drawer here it has like lip glosses, cream, cheek products and stuff. But yeah, I counted this because it has 4 shadows in it. It's kind of a palette. Then we have a Charlotte Tilbury quad. This is the luxury palette of pops in Pillow Talk. I don't use this one a lot, but I do think it's really nice to pair with like neutral mattes. And if you want to use any of these as like a topper, I think that it does work really well. This palette here actually really surprised me. I did get this from Stylevana. They sent it to me as part of like the sponsored video that I did with them. This is the Chica y Chico One Shot Eye palette in Night Drink. And I actually already have pan on two of the shades in this palette. But yeah, it's a nice little 6-pan, again, eyeshadow palette. These are really cheap and I think it's a pretty good formula for the price. I have a little NARS Duo. I don't actually think I have any NARS eyeshadow palettes in my collection. I have had ones way back in the past, but I think I've decluttered them. But this is a little NARS Duo. This is in Kauai, I think it is, and it's just like a little shimmer duo. I've barely used this one. I picked this up after like watching someone's video like saying that they use this all the time and they highly recommended it, and it was a fantastic little duo. I've like barely touched it. My little Marc Jacobs Cherryrific palette. You guys have seen this recently in my Pan Those eyeshadows. I love this little palette. The only thing that drives me mental about it is the little clasp on the packaging has broken, but I do think that it is a great color story. Again, it's like me in a color story. Love working with these like magenta colors, and this one in the middle here that I panned is a gorgeous color. Blast from the past is my Violet Floss Flamingo palette. I have not grabbed this out for a very long time, but I feel like this is one of the like OG pastel palettes, and I think if you have this palette as well as one that I'm going to show you in a few minutes, you've kind of covered for pastels. These colors are great. You can kind of like build them up and intensify them, or you can really like sheer them out to give you that more pastel effect on the eyes. And the shimmers are actually really nice in there as well. Speaking of great pastel palettes, this one here is a somewhat recent addition to my collection. This is the Glamlight Ice Cream Dream palette. And again, this is another great palette that you can grab for if you are looking for that pastel effect on your eyes. I think these colors are great for like building up the color and intensity, or again, you can play them down a little bit more for that pastel effect. And the shimmers in this one are really nice. I was actually really surprised by how much I enjoy this palette, and every time I reach for this palette, it does get me like inspired and excited and happy to like play with these colors again. Sydney Grace Autumn's Rain. This is the only eyeshadow palette that I have from Sydney Grace. I do have a lot of their individual single shadows though. I don't find myself reaching for this palette all that much, just because it is on that deeper spectrum of colors, and like it's got a lot of deeper shimmers in there, and I don't often reach for those. Coloured Rain Queen of Hearts palette. This was a very popular palette back in the day, and again, this was one that was a little bit more difficult for me to get my hands on. I have used it a little bit, but not enough. This is like a growing trend with my collection. The Balm Nude Tude palette. I blame Carissa Pukas for this purchase. Way back in the day when I was watching her channel when she was doing more beauty content, she did a look, I think it was like a Gatsby inspired, like 1920s inspired makeup look, and she used this palette in that video, and I was like, I have to have that palette. It's very boring nowadays, but I kind of can't let go of it because it is like a purchase from one of my very early on YouTube memories. And then I think this is the last palette that I have that is like only one from a specific brand. This is the Geology Cosmetics Pilbara palette. You guys have heard me raving about this palette of late. I mentioned this in my roundup of my palettes that I purchased in 2021. It ranked quite high. I think it came in at like 5 or 6. That was out of almost like 20 palettes. And then I also mentioned this in my... Did I mention it in that? I think I mentioned it in my eyeshadow palette tag 2.0, but this is a great little palette. It is Australian made, well, It is Australian owned. I think the palette itself might be made in the PRC, but it is definitely Australian owned. It is designed around the Pilbara region in Western Australia. I'm pretty sure it's Western Australia. I'm a terrible Aussie, but pretty sure it's Western Australia. And it's basically designed and inspired by a lot of the different like rocks and formations like in that area, and different minerals and stuff that you can find within that region. I do have one more brand that I only have one palette from, and that is Lethal Cosmetics. This is the Lethal is Dead and Teresa is Dead collaboration. I love this palette. I think it's fantastic. This again ranked quite high in my 2021 ranking, and it also was featured in my eyeshadow palette tag 2.0. I have a lot more products from Lethal, but I don't often buy their like pre-made palettes. I normally design my own palettes. So this is the only like standalone pre-designed palette that I have from them. Let's go to Colourpop now. I have 6 palettes from. So I have 3 of like their original little 12 pan eyeshadow palettes. So I have the Yes Please palette, which everyone was raving about back in the day. This was like something that made Colourpop super popular. Then I also have the Femme Rosa palette. This was a collaboration with Karrueche. And then also the little My Little Pony collaboration. I do have a pan in this one. And then I have 3 of the monochromatic palettes, and I do believe I've done a video on all of these palettes. So I have the It's My Pleasure palette, which is the purple monochromatic palette. Then I have the Just My Luck. And last but not least is the Blue Moon. Let's go on over to these 2 here. These are by Blush Tribe back when they were still called Blush Tribe. So I have the Blush Tribe Manasa palette. This one's an alright palette. I think I did a video on this one, and you know, the formula, it's just okay. It's just okay. And then the Paulina palette, which was a collaboration between Blush Tribe and Paulina. I actually really like the color story on this palette. There's some fantastic shadows in this palette, and the color story goes really well together. So I'm really happy and glad that I picked that one up. Do have 4 of the certified palettes. So we've got the Dynasty palette, which is like deeper, grungier colors. And we have the Affinity, the Tropical Wonders, and last but not least is the Dynasty palette, and I do have a pan in this one. Juvia's Place, I do have a fair bit from Juvia's Place. I have 7 palettes from Juvia's Place. The Juvia's Place Masquerade Mini. Then we have the Dulce palette. That purple in the middle, the Festival palette, that pink and that teal, so pretty. The Zulu palette, the Saharan 2, I do have a pan in this one, like a little pan down in this one in the corner. And we have the Nubian, which is like all neutrals. I actually quite like this palette. I used to take this traveling with me all of the time, especially when I knew that I wanted something to give me like a good neutral effect. And then the last Juvia's Place palette is the Nubian 2. The one thing that does kind of annoy me about these palettes is just how big they are and how big the pans are. I wish they were smaller pans. Next, we might go to Huda Beauty. And from Huda, I only have 3 palettes. These ones here. I kind of have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with Huda Beauty. First palette that I have from her is the original textured shadow palette in the rose gold edition. This was like her first eyeshadow palette. I kind of wish I never picked this one up, if I'm honest. The Huda Beauty Desert Dusk. This has a glitter in there, and I really wish that the glitter wasn't in there. But other than that, the palette is quite nice. And last but not least, is this gorgeous palette, the Mercury Retrograde. There are some great shimmers in here and some great formulas. I think I did a review on this one. I'm not quite sure. I will leave a link down below and I'll link up in the corner my playlist for my eyeshadow palette reviews, and you guys can go on over there and check out like all of the palettes that I've done reviews on. Let's do Urban Decay next. I only have 4 palettes from Urban Decay. Out of all of these palettes, this one is 100% my favorite. We'll leave that one to last. So obviously I have Urban Decay Naked One. This is Naked One, right? Naked One. I do have some pans in this palette, but that is Naked One, which you can no longer get. Then we also have Naked Two, which still has the brush in it. What is wrong with me? Naked Two, and then last but not least is Naked Three. And I have a pan in this one as well. That's Naked Three. The best palette I have from Urban Decay is the Kaleidoscope Dreams palette. This was a collaboration with Kristen Leanne, and I actually really like this palette. This is probably one of my favorite palettes from Urban Decay that I've tried. The formula on the shimmers in this palette is absolutely gorgeous. The only thing that I get really annoyed about with this palette is all of like the different pan sizes and shapes and positions, and it drives me bananas. But the formula itself and the color story is beautiful. LH Cosmetics or Linda Huda Cosmetics. I only have 2 palettes from LH Cosmetics. The first one is the Enchanted Secrets palette. This one is like a shimmery topper palette. And then the Spectral palette is like a Pastel Dream. The formula on this one is, it's all right, but the colors, I really like the colors in this palette. Fenty Beauty. This is like, probably my biggest regrets out of my collection, and I should have listened to you guys. I totally got sucked in with marketing on these ones. So these are the Snapshot Shadows number 9 and 10. Now, the first round of the Snapshot Shadows did not get great reviews at all. They really got absolutely trashed all over Instagram, all over YouTube. And then these came out, and I had hope. I had really high hopes that they fixed up the formula, and I saw the swatches and everything like that on Instagram, and I caved, and I am still regretting it. So this is number 9. This is the Wine palette. I'm currently trying to pan this one in the middle here, and oh my gosh, it is a patchy, dry mess. It can be difficult to work with. So that's that one. And then this one here is the green one, which is Money. And again, the formula's not great. Let's venture on over to Lorac and then to Anastasia Beverly Hills. So from Lorac, I only have 3 palettes. So I have the Lorac Pro 1, 2, and the Mega Pro 1. So Lorac Pro 1, I do have a couple of pans, and this is what it looks like. It's quite a neutral palette. These, I guess, were kind of the Lorac rival to the Urban Decay Naked palettes, and I do think that they did a really good job kind of trying to be that rival. This is the Lorac Pro 2. And then we also have the Mega Pro. Now the Mega Pro was like an Amazon exclusive or something like that. It was very hard to get your hands on if you weren't in the US, but I did manage to get one. Anastasia Beverly Hills, I have 5 of her eyeshadow palettes, and they are all the velvet ones. It was definitely Modern Renaissance first. And this is what my Modern Renaissance looks like. She does have lots of pans in her. I would really like to get a lot more pans in here, but that's Modern Renaissance. Subculture, we all know what Subculture looks like, and the drama that ensued. I do have a pan in that one as well. Norvina is probably one of my favorite out of all 5. My Norvina looks like a janky mess. Prism. I went through a stage of like really loving Prism, and I do think it has some cool unique colors in there, but I just haven't really reached for all that much since my initial review. And then last but not least is Soft Glam, and I think for me at the moment Soft Glam is probably the one that I would get the most use out of, just because it does allow me to do those like everyday nude looks that I can wear to work. I forgot an Urban Decay palette. I also have the Urban Decay Naked Basics. Huda Beauty, I do have a few bits and pieces from them. I'll start off with the Artisan palette because the Artisan is a bit of like a mixed palette. So it does have shadows in it as well as face products. So all of the shadows are the 9 in the center there. Huda Beauty Saffron palette. I'm not entirely sure whether they sell this one anymore. And then this one here is the Block Party palette. And if I'm honest, I don't even know if I've used this one. Too Faced, I actually only have 2 palettes from Too Faced. So I have the original Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. Again, we all know what this looks like. So we'll probably all have this in our collection. And then I also have the Too Faced Gingerbread Spice palette. I actually really like this palette. I think it's actually a really great little palette. Old Mate Wayne. So I have 2 eyeshadow palettes from my Old Mate Wayne. We have the Luxury Eye palette. So these are both 6-pan eyeshadow palettes. The first one that I got from him was the Pearl palette. I always, for some reason, struggle to get these open, but that is the Pearl palette there. And then I did get gifted this palette here for, it's like late Christmas, early birthday present. This is the Tourmaline palette, and I did have this one in my monthly makeup basket this past month. So if you want to know my thoughts on this palette, then you can go check out my little mini review of this palette in that video. Be Perfect. Now from Be Perfect, I actually have 4 palettes and they're all collab palettes. 95% of this collection is Stacey Marie palettes. So the first palette that I ever purchased from Be Perfect was the Be Perfect Stacey Marie Carnival 1 palette. So that's this one here. And again, I'm almost certain that I've done a review on all 3 of the Carnival palettes. So that's this one. This kind of started my love affair with the Carnival Stacey Marie palettes. I then skipped Carnival 2 because there was a lot of double ups between this palette and Carnival 2. And then I went to Carnival 3. And this is a freaking gorgeous palette. And I love the shades in here. The rainbow coverage is amazing. And the shimmers are glorious. The only gripe that I have with this palette is just how freaking big it is. This one here is even bigger again. This is the most recent edition of the Carnival saga. This is the Carnival 4. And this is what I say is the expansion of the Natasha Denona Mini Retro palette. This is what I think the expansion of the Natasha Denona Mini Retro palette should have looked like, but just obviously a little bit more condensed and tamed down and concise, not like just a vomit of color. I do also have the Be Perfect and Jar makeup artist collaboration. This is the Clientele palette. I actually purchased this for my makeup kit, and I have used it a little bit, and I did create some really nice looks out of it. But I have 2 palettes from Bare Minerals. I actually quite like the Bare Minerals formula. So the first one that I got was the Bare Minerals Wish palette. The packaging on this one is very quickly dying. Yeah, it's just a neutral palette. It's a really nice formula and color story. And then this palette here, I constantly rave about it because I freaking love it. But this is the Bare Minerals Aurora Lights palette. I love how small and compact this is. This actually has 18 shadows in it. Can you believe? But yeah, this is the color story. There's some beautiful eyeshadows in here. I have pan on like 6 shades or something in there. I have 4 palettes from Dose of Colors. So we'll start off with the Dose of Colors Desi and Katie Francation palette. I actually have this in my Pan Those eyeshadows at the moment. And I actually am wearing that like olive green shimmer on my lid today, and it's actually really, really nice. It pairs super well with like deep navy blues. My Snow Angels palette, this is also a palette that is currently in my Pan Those eyeshadows. This is one that is on my eyes today. The like really deep blue on my eyes is from this palette. Then we have the Dose of Colors and I Love Sarah E collaboration palette. I don't think This one has a name. I think it's just called Dose of Colors I Love Sarah E. And this is what it looks like. And then last but not least is this glorious little palette, and I freaking love this palette. This is the Marvelous Mauves palette, and I have 3 pans in this palette because there was a time there where I just could not put this down. Natasha Denona. The one that I had in my collection for a very long time was the Natasha Denona Star palette. And I'm not a massive lover of this palette. And because I didn't love this one as much as I was hoping I would, it really kind of deterred me for a very long time from trying more from Natasha Denona and picking up more from her. But in this past year, I actually purchased 3 eyeshadow palettes from Natasha Denona. So we'll start off with a really bright one. This is the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and I actually am really happy that I picked this one up because I've since discontinued this one, and I'm really glad that I have it in my collection. You guys talked me into picking up the Natasha Denona Mini Retro. I'm very glad that I did finally pick this one up. Those 2 shimmers at the end here, well, this one here is beautiful. Even that like khaki green shimmer is really pretty. I'm really glad that I did finally decide to pick this one up. And then also this one, I just couldn't not. And I've used this one a fair bit last year. And every time I created a look using this palette, you guys were like begging to know what it was and always complimenting me on my looks when I use this palette. Mel Cosmetics, I do have a few palettes from Mel Cosmetics. So I have 3 of the stacks. I don't use these all that much just because I find the packaging just a bit annoying. So I have the Lovesick stack, the Gunmetal stack, and the Haze stack. This is the Lovesick stack. This is the Gunmetal stack. So this one here, Industrial, is the one that's in my Pan Those eyeshadows at the moment. Last but not least is the Haze stack, which just fucking dropped a chunk of gold glitter all over me. So this is the Haze stack. This chunk in the corner literally just fell on my pants. Fun times, fun times. So that's the Haze stack. I do have 5 of the Melt palettes. The first one is the Melt Rust palette. I do have a pan in this one as well. That's what that one looks like. It's just like a beautiful neutral palette. Then we have the 27 palette, which is more of like a mauvey kind of pinky purple color story on the neutral spectrum. The Melt She's in Parties palette, which is a purple dream. I just can't get enough of these 2 beautiful palettes. So this was the Melt holiday collection for, I don't know when, but this is the Vida and the Muerte palette. And they go together, make a beautiful skull. So this is the Muerte palette. So it's very deep and grungy and dark. And then this one is the Vida, which is more on the brighter side. Pat McGrath is a fairly recent addition to my collection. For the longest time there, I was hell-bent on not trying Pat McGrath, but now I have 5 eyeshadow palettes from Pat McGrath, 4 holiday palettes, and then 1 isn't. So 1 is like the traditional Pat McGrath style palette. This is the Divine Rose 2 palette in the limited edition like pink metallic packaging. This is what it looks like. Mine squeaks, which is really annoying considering how much I paid for this palette. How annoying is that? I paid like 200 bucks for this palette and it freaking squeaks. Nocturnal Nirvana palette. This is one of the quads. I have 2 of the holiday palettes from 2020. I purchased one and I got given one as a gift, and I'm not mad about it because I actually really like this palette. I know some of you think this palette's like garbage, but I really like this palette. I think it's a beautiful palette, and I personally think I prefer the shimmers in this palette and the mattes in last year's palette. And then this was the Christmas palette from last year. And like I said, I think the mattes in this palette are better than the one the year before. Nomad Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes. I actually have all of their eyeshadow palettes so far. I have one on the way. I purchased the Nocturnal Nirvana palette and I am waiting for that to arrive in the mail. So their first palette was the Sandra Rose palette. My palette is a little bit messy. Just because I've had a few shadows in here break and I've like tried to repress one and it shattered because these eyeshadows don't work with alcohol when you try and repress them. You can just simply repress them with your fingers. If you just like crush the pigment up again and put it back in the pan, gently press over it with a tissue, it works fine. But this was the first eyeshadow palette from Nomad Cosmetics. You can now get this in kind of like a relaunched version, in a mini version, I think. The Huda Beauty palette. I freaking love this palette. I love the theme, I love the color story, I love the multi-chromes in there. This palette came in as #1 in my palettes that I purchased last year. And I did also feature this in one of the categories in my eyeshadow palette tag 2.0. And then the Silent Night palette is one that came out at Christmas time. And this one I think has probably one of my favorite multi-chromes in it that I have ever used. This color Baubles down here is, oh, it's amazing. It takes my breath away. It's gorgeous. My two most recent additions to my collection are these two palettes here. This is the Hindash Beauty palette and the Hindash Monochromance palette. So I'm sure you've all seen what this looks like, but this is the Hindash Beauty palette. And then this one is the Hindash Monochromance palette. I have been dabbling in these over the last couple of days since I purchased them, or since I received them in the mail, I should say. So far, so good. I'm actually like really enjoying these. And last but not least is the brand that I think I have the most palettes from in my collection, and it is Kaleidos. I have 10 palettes from Kolados. I don't own every palette that they've ever released, but I own most of them. I do actually own the first palette that they ever released, and this is the Deep Sea Luster palette. And this one's actually really, really pretty. I've been using this over the last month in my Shop My Stash. Some of the shimmers in here are gorgeous. I have 7 of the Futurism palettes. Futurism 1 Sci-Fi Green. This palette is beautiful. It's like the palette that kind of got me a little bit into greens. Cyber Bronze palette. This one's just a neutral palette. Out of all of them, it's probably one of my, it's probably ranks down the bottom in terms of all of my Futurism palettes. Astro Pink, this is the Futurism 3. Oh, this one is beautiful. Beautiful. Number 4, which was the VR Neon, and this one is super bright, so bright. Futurism 5 Electro Turquoise, another one that is beautiful. That like blue shimmer in the middle is, oh, it's so pretty. Number 6 and 7, which is the Lunar Lavender and Sashimi City palette. These ones are both quite recent additions to my collection, but the Lunar Lavender, oh, the shimmers in this one, oh, they're so good. They're so good. And then Sashimi City, I much prefer this as a nude eyeshadow palette than the Cyber Bronze. Also have the Kolados Flower Punk palette. I don't totally love this palette. And last but not least is this amazing palette here. This is the Kolados Makeup Club Nebula palette. This was a collaboration with Angelica Nyquist, and this is what it looks like. I did do a review on this one as well. That is my entire eyeshadow palette collection. I need to like put everything back now and put everything back in my drawers. It's going to be a big job. That's why I've been avoiding this video for so long, because I knew it would be such a big job grabbing everything out. But I am very glad that I finally got to share with you my entire eyeshadow palette collection. Let me know down in the comments box whether you have any of these palettes, what your favorite eyeshadow palette in your collection is. While you're down there, if you did enjoy this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. If you are new around here and you enjoyed this video and you enjoy watching Project Panning content or any other beauty related content, I hope you'll consider subscribing down below. And with that all being said, I hope that you're having an absolutely fantastic day. I hope that you are staying safe, healthy, and looking after yourself. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, beautiful.